Hey, what's up, everyone? Kino here, back with another House of the Dragon review. Not in my usual recording place just because it's so hot. I had to move to a cooler room. We just watched the fourth episode. I don't remember what it was called. Basically, in this episode, Rhaenyra, was given the choice of who she wanted to wed. And she doesn't really want to wed any guy. We see the consequences of what happens from that in this episode. Real quick before I get into the reaction, though, some people were definitely commenting that, like, the book spoilers, they didn't want to watch these videos because of the book spoilers. Totally understand that. It should be noted that in Game of Thrones itself, they referenced the Dance of the Dragons, and they referenced that Rhaenyra lost it. There's a scene with Joffrey talking to Marjorie, and he's like, that's where Rhaenyra was buried. Her brother had her burned alive with dragon fire. So you are kind of meant to go into this knowing that Rhaenyra loses. It kind of operates a little bit on dramatic irony. The idea that the outcomes, so when characters are saying certain things or doing certain things, you're meant to know, oh, this doesn't work out, and that's why this is tragic. Even though we know it doesn't work out, we're seeing the characters struggle through it. So that's why I spoil the books, and also just because what's interesting for me is to talk about the consequences from the books. But if that's not, what you're interested in, if you want to go into the show blind, totally fair. I liken it a little bit to like Better Call Saul, right? When I was doing before this, which is like, he becomes Saul Goodman, and you're meant to know that going into there. You're not meant to necessarily go in blind. Regardless, totally understand if you don't want to watch this, but I am going to be spoiling the books, just because I find it interesting to talk about details from the books because I'm such a big fan of them. In this episode, Daemon comes back from his war in the Stepstones. He was crowned king, but he ultimately decides he doesn't want to do that, so he returns, offers his crown to the king, and is welcomed back into the good graces. Meanwhile, Rhaenyra doesn't want to marry any of the guys, even though her father gave her free reign to choose who she wanted to marry. And so she sneaks off with Daemon one night, and they go into the city. And it reminded me a little bit of Arya going through the city, like, in disguise. She's a tomboy. She doesn't want to be the traditional kind of wife and mother and stuff. And then they go to, like, a whorehouse, and then he, like, seduces her, and he's, like, about to bang her. But then he stops. I think the implication is that he decided that she was too young or something, or he just didn't want to do it. So he doesn't deflower her. But she got kind of worked up from that. So when she returns home, she seduces Sir Criston Cole, her bodyguard. The king, Otto Hightower, finds out about this. He tells the king. The king doesn't believe him at first, but ultimately he confronts Daemon and he confirms that he did her, even though he didn't. But his argument was, since I deflowered her, you should marry her to me, because he wants the throne. The king kicks him out of the city, tells him to go home, and tells Rhaenyra, like, hey, you have no choice anymore. You're gonna marry Sir Laenor Velaryon, who is the son of the Sea Snake, who's still mad at the king. But then she convinces her father to fire Sir Otto Hightower because he's serving himself, because he wants his grandson, Aegon, the king's son, on the throne. Now, most of this is directly from the book. Now, the whole mystery of who Rhaenyra sleeps with is a mystery in the books. It's written like a history book, so there's like different sources. So one source says Daemon seduced her, one source says Sir Criston Cole seduced her, one source says she seduced Criston Cole, something. So there's a bunch of different stories, so we don't know the actual history. So they've kind of combined them. So Daemon almost slept with her, and then she did sleep with Sir Criston Cole. which will have consequences later on, as we'll see. But again, she's kind of a free spirit, and she wants to be with who she wants to be with. I will say, I have not necessarily really loved Rhaenyra's characterization, just because we've seen this before. We've seen the princess who doesn't want to follow the rules. Again, it's a little bit like Arya, a little bit like Daenerys. But unlike even Daenerys, Rhaenyra has not really done anything to kind of prove she deserves to be the queen. And I think that's what, when people criticize Rhaenyra, a lot of people are taking it like, oh, you're just criticizing her because she's a strong woman and you don't. Well, the problem with that whole kind of characterization of hers as like a strong woman who deserves the throne is she's acting like the only reason she's being denied the throne is because she's a woman, which is partly true. But in order to counterbalance that, I feel like they should have scenes showing that like she deserves to be, she would make a good ruler. But they haven't really done anything like that in this show so far. She's kind of very selfish, very much, I don't want to marry anyone, I don't have any kids, and I don't want to do anything. And it's like, I understand her reasons for that, but part of being a good ruler is self-sacrifice. Daenerys actually goes through a big arc of that in the show and the books of like, hey, I'm doing things I don't want to do, but I have to do it because of politics, because of it's a good reason. And Rhaenyra has not really had that characterization yet, like Daenerys, she learns the Dothraki culture. She becomes a part of that, and so she earns the respect of the people, and that's what makes her a good ruler. Rhaenyra is just kind of acting childish, and I think that's the problem a lot of people have with like kind of these like feminist, characters who are like, I deserve the throne and you shouldn't just deny it to me because I'm a woman. Well, it's like, okay, but act like you deserve it, Put the needs of the realm above your own kind of selfish things of you don't want to marry or you don't want to have kids. It's not just like a sexist, patriarch thing that she needs to marry. The whole conflict is like, you need heirs to the throne because if something happens to you, then there's going to be a big war over the people who are going to take over because there's not a clear line of succession. This is not coming out of nowhere. This system exists for a reason, and I just felt like they played it up too much where it's like, it's a sexist society and that's the only thing wrong with it. No, there's reasons for all this kind of stuff. But I just had a problem. I don't think Rhaenyra has had the great characterization she deserves. And also, she's very, like, I get that they wanted to make her like a tomboy, but she's supposed to be the realm's delight. But it doesn't seem like anyone likes her. It's because she's so standoffish. Maybe they will show her in future episodes kind of growing into the role. But from what I remember the books, she's supposed to be very charming, very much like getting everyone to like her. And that would go a long way to justifying her claim that like the only reason people don't want her on the throne is because she's a woman. But it's like, no, people also don't want you on the throne because you're kind of a bitch. Like you're not, like you're making no efforts to make people like you. You're disrespecting people who are like trying to go for your hand. You're doing all this kind of stuff. It's not an inspiring ruler. She's not coming off that way. And again, in future episodes, she might do it. But I feel like, from the start, we should have seen a little bit more of that if we're going to root for her on the throne. Also, Otto Hightower being dismissed, like that, again, that's from the books. It makes sense. But I felt like he should have been a little bit more self-serving. Like, in the books, it's pretty clear that, like, he was bugging the king constantly to make Aegon the heir, but he only did it once in this one. And so, him being dismissed seemed like it kind of came out of nowhere. Also, the dialogue in this show is kind of dumb sometimes. Like, when Otto is trying to tell the king about what Rhaenyra was doing, he's like, Your Grace, your daughter was seen in a brothel. And the King Viserys is like, what was she doing there? And it's like, bruh, can't you, like, take a hint, Like, dialogue should be smart. Characters should be smarter than this. They don't have to spell out everything completely. But it went on for, like, a few minutes being like, she was with Daemon naked. And the king's like, naked? what were they doing naked? Like, come on, Visser, stop being so fucking dumb. Take a hint. But this show's not gonna be as good as the books. Like, just straight up, I can just tell from these 4 episodes that like the writing is not there. It is closer to the books than Game of Thrones was, but it's still not up to that par. It's not telling the same kind of story. It doesn't have the same kind of witty dialogue. They have to spell things out. The characterization is much more simplistic than I think it should be. I don't think it's gonna get better. Not awful show. I will say that. Very, like, a lot of cool little details where it's like, oh, that's from the books. That's awesome. In the beginning, they had a little fight between the Blackwoods and the Brackens. That was cool. I'm glad that they brought that lore element into there. Unfortunately, the writing is just, it feels like it could have used a second, draft. We'll leave it there for now. Thank you guys for watching, whoever does watch this. And stay tuned for the next episode coming next week.